Hi everyone, and a warm welcome to today's SME Club event. For those of you who I've not met before, I'm Jen Quinn, Growth Manager at Virgin Money Manchester, and we're delighted to be sponsors of today's event. It's been a really exciting time for us here at Virgin Money. Music has always been at the heart of our brand, and alongside our Emerging Stars programme, which supports some of the UK's most exciting and up-and-coming talent, we've also helped to launch the UK's first socially distanced music venue, the Virgin Money Unity Arena. We have some exclusive rewards and VIP giveaways just for our Virgin Money customers and account holders, so please do check out our social channels for more info. We'd love to hear how you found today's event. Please do tag us in your social media posts. That's at Virgin Money on all social platforms. Sponsoring overseas workers in 2021 is today's topic. So for now, I'll hand you over to Gary McIndoe from Latitude Law and look forward to catching up with you at our next event.
Morning, everybody, and thanks very much, Jen. So I'm Gary, I'm Managing Director at Latitude Law. We're based in Manchester, we've also got an office in Liverpool. We specialise in immigration. We act for private client, corporate clients, a wide range of corporates from multinationals to national businesses, but the bulk of our corporate instructions are small and medium businesses. So it's with that kind of business in mind that I'm kind of going to focus today's presentation. It's a run through of what the UK government's got in mind for managed migration, and in particular sponsored employment from January 2021. The detail of this, the new system, is yet to appear in kind of immigration rules, but we do know quite a lot from government announcements what it's going to look like. So the first thing to say, as people will be aware, is that free movement of EU citizens and their families is going to end at the end of this year. The government's made clear that there was going to be no extension to that despite the pandemic, and so it came to pass. So at the end of this year, EU citizens are no longer going to have that option to simply relocate to the UK and then find work. The cut-off date is important for employers, because if an EU citizen does relocate to the UK before 31st December, even if you're seeing them after that date, you may be interviewing them after that date, you can still employ them under the old rules. And we've got two kind of parallel systems in play at the moment. We've got the old EEA regulations, which have been around for years, and the government's EU settlement scheme. So under that settlement scheme, EU citizens and their families, they either get pre-settled status if they've not lived here for 5 years already, or they get settled status if they've completed 5 years in the UK. So that cut-off is going to be crucial for employers, really, because any EU citizen arriving after the 31st of December is going to be subject to this new managed migration regime. To employ workers under the system, you're going to need, or your business is going to need, a sponsor license. Now, many businesses in the UK already have a license, but there are still a fairly high number of businesses that don't, and quite often they are businesses who've not really had to in the past. You know, perhaps they're businesses that employ workers at lower skill levels or at lower salary rates, and they've not really needed to engage with the sponsor licensing system. The fact is, though, that from January 2021, it's going to become more relevant for a lot more businesses to get a sponsor license. So the license, if you're successful, you get it for 4 years. The cost, you know, they're not astronomical. It's £536 for a small business, which generally defined as kind of 50 employees or less. If you're a larger business, the cost for that 4-year license is £1,476. You have to complete an application, and as part of that application process, we would recommend that you demonstrate in the application process that you've got proper HR systems, that you're in a position to sponsor and monitor those overseas workers that you wish to employ. And I'll talk a little bit more on a later slide about the appropriate skill and salary levels. Sponsor license applications have traditionally been quite time-consuming, quite administratively burdensome, but the government's announcement really in relation to what the post-2020 regime is going to be that the system is going to be more user-friendly, it's going to be more intuitive, and it's going to be a lighter touch for employers. But we kind of need to wait and see really what that's going to look like. One thing's for certain though, if you're applying for a license, you really need to think about putting together a business case for demonstrating that you can't recruit from the resident labour market. Just a slide here on right to work checks. Employers, whether they're licensed or not, will be familiar with the need to check an employee's entitlement to work. So for EU citizens, the current way that you do that, so you just need to see an EU passport or an ID card. That's going to continue until next June. The non-EU nationals checking is a little more complex, a little more administratively burdensome, but probably most employers are going to be familiar with the need, and it's kind of built into a lot of HR kind of systems or kind of payroll systems these days that you have to do these checks, and you have to copy and secure evidence of an individual's right to work. There's also the Home Office has an online employer checking service as well, so you can always resort to that in order to kind of back things up. So the current terminology is changing slightly. The Tier 2 General, I mean, the whole Tier 2 phrase is going to go out the window. It's just going to become the skilled worker route. So you're going to have to replace Tier 2 General, which is anything other than intra-company transfer from abroad. That's just a skilled worker license, and then obviously the intra-company transfer licenses if you've got an office overseas that's transferring an existing member of staff into the UK. So this is an outline of what is going to be required for your skilled workers from the 1st of January. The job offer, which you'll be responsible for, the skill level. Now, that is a change from the current system. Currently, RQF 6 is the threshold, which is kind of degree level and above, really. So the government's reduced that to take account of the fact that the labour market's not going to have access to a large number of EU citizens. And just for reference, the latest stats to September 2018 showed that there were just over 200,000 EU migrants relocating to the UK in that year. So it's a pretty high number, and obviously within that number, quite a lot of low-skilled jobs. A lot of low-skilled workers were coming to the UK. So it's those low-skilled positions really that are left out of the new scheme. So RQF3, A-level equivalent type jobs, but not very low-skilled jobs. Going to need a minimum level of English, which they'll show through a secure English language test that the government authorises, or if they have a degree taught in English, that gets them through that test. And then you've got these ideas, this kind of salary concept. So the baseline salary, the absolute minimum you're going to be able to pay a sponsored worker is 20,480. Now, the general salary threshold is higher, obviously, than that, and we'll see in the following slides how the two figures interact. That 25,600 is the general threshold, but that also needs to be considered against what's called the going rate for the particular role, and you'll need to look at the standard occupation codes to find out what the going rate is for the role in which you wish to employ. Okay. So just a note on fees here. The cost of licensing really has been kept relatively low by the government, but when you actually sponsor a worker, that's when the fees kind of kick in a little bit more, really. For an employer in particular, the immigration skills charge is can be quite significant. If you're sponsoring a worker for 3 years, obviously you have, if you're a small employer, £364 a year immigration skills charge, which is a charge, essentially another fee that the government charges, and it's supposed to be applied to encouraging apprenticeships, essentially, for resident younger workers. The health surcharge as well is quite a big deal, quite a big burden. An employer is not required to pay that on behalf of the sponsored worker. Some choose to, but for your employee, bear in mind that from October, they're going to have to be paying, on top of Home Office application fees, this £624 a year for the health surcharge, which allows them to access the NHS. Okay, we're going to share these slides at the end of the presentation. There are links in this page to the coding tool, so you can work out which SOC code, SOCC, your particular vacancy falls into. There's also a list of those of SOC codes in the immigration rules, as well as on the ONS website. So, as I mentioned before, the skill level drops from RQF6 to RQF3, so sponsorship becomes a much more accessible thing for employers. The shortage occupation list, I'll work through an example in a minute, and you'll see how that kind of how that's relevant. But it's worth looking at because this used to be a very limited list, but in December last year it was expanded quite significantly by the government. So you've got quite a lot of positions that you might not expect to be shortage occupations on there. You've got like graphic design or web design roles, for example, which are included in the shortage occupations list. Another reform that the government's introduced is the abolition of the formal resident labour market test. Now, those of you who've worked for employers with sponsor licences may well be familiar with that test, quite a rigid test. It was necessary, for example, to advertise a role with Job Centre Plus, which often was pointless because it was a particularly highly skilled job and led to a large number of very poor applications. So it's good that that's gone. But as the second bullet point says, as a sponsor, you've still got to demonstrate to the Home Office that you're looking to fill a genuine vacancy. Now, the rules don't say how you're going to do that. So you're going to have some discretion, but obviously you're going to have to exercise that discretion reasonably. It's going to be subject to compliance checks by the Home Office. The whole sponsor licensing regime is subject to checks by Home Office officials who can do that online. They can interrogate HMRC records, for example, to ensure that appropriate salaries are being paid. And they can, in perhaps more extreme circumstances, they can conduct compliance visits, which are either announced or unannounced, and it can be quite a stressful time to deal with a full compliance visit by Home Office officials. So that goes back to, again, the need to ensure all your HR processes are in place at the point you apply for your license. Okay, and then the final point on this slide, there is at the moment, until the end of this year, a cap on certain Tier 2 skilled work hires. It's basically those applicants who are abroad, who you want to hire from abroad, and the cap's being suspended. So there's going to be no more monthly ballot. The monthly ballot was quite a cumbersome process whereby there were kind of points were assessed and certificates of sponsorship were authorised by the Home Office, what are called restricted certificates of sponsorship. So that's all going to go from the 1st of January, which is very welcome. Okay, so what are the points requirements then? 70 points needed. You get 50 from these mandatory, what they call non-tradable criteria. So offer of work from an employer, required skill level, so RQF3 or above, and proving you've got sufficient English language ability. So that's your 50 points in the bag. The remaining 20, there are various ways in which you can achieve those. So we go back to those concepts I mentioned before, the general salary threshold, 25,600, or the going rate for the particular role that you're recruiting for. If you're paying the going rate, that's another 20 points. So that's your 70, that's all you need. If you're paying less than that going rate or the 25,600, but remember the minimum 20,800, you can gain your remaining 20 points in different ways. So you look at the top there, you've got your non-tradable points there, and then you've got different levels of point scoring for different salaries between the baseline 2480, sorry, I said that wrong, I said 2480 and 25,600. So you can score up to 20 points if you're paying 25,600 or above, 10 points if you're slightly below, no points if you're between 20 and 23. But remember, then you then look at the shortage occupation list. So the last couple of tradable points on there, the PhD and PhD in STEM subjects, perhaps not relevant to a lot of employers, but worth bearing in mind if you're operating in one of those particular sectors. So here's an example then, you've got a graphic designer, you're going to be paying them below the general salary threshold and below the SOC code minimum for that role. So they get 50 points for the non-tradable aspects of the application, as I've mentioned, but because graphic designers are a shortage occupation, they score their remaining 20 that way. Okay. A few technical changes. We've got in-country switching. It's often quite challenging to switch into sponsored work categories at the moment. Some of you may have come across this as an issue. Certain students can't do it. You have to essentially be a graduate student if you want to switch in country. The switch from intercompany transfer to general was often a problem, but the bar on switching, sort of moving between sponsored work routes, is being removed. Remember though that if you've got someone's just here as a tourist or someone on a short-term study visa, they aren't going to be able to move into a sponsored work category. They're going to have to go back to their own country and apply for a visa if you want to employ them. Okay. Cooling off. Again, it's been a bit of an obstacle for employers over the years. This idea that if you were intending to switch from ICT to general, that you had to then leave the country, spend 12 months outside the UK in this cooling off period, and then return here as a tier 2 general migrant. And then the bottom point there, the new entrant, the redefining of new entrant. Essentially, if you look at the SOC codes, if you follow that link, you'll see that there's a new entrant rate and there's an experience rate for most jobs. New entrants are quite strictly defined at the moment. They're going to be, that definition is going to be broadened a little bit to include people working towards recognised professional or postdoctoral qualifications. Okay. So we've been talking about the future already from January 2021, but looking beyond January, the government's got a few other tricks up its sleeve as well. You've got global talent. The global talent routes, as the name suggests, it's very, very highly skilled individuals. No sponsorship for them is required, and it becomes universally available, by which I mean it's available for EU citizens as well. A new highly skilled worker route, again requiring no sponsorship from an employer. That's in the pipeline. We don't know when that's going to come in. Perhaps the most significant thing here, though, is the new graduate migration route now. Up until maybe like 8 years ago, the UK had this kind of post-study work visa for British university graduates, and it allowed them to work without sponsorship for 2 years. The government withdrew that migration route because they felt it was being abused, but they have decided to reintroduce it, which, again, it's a response really to the to the inevitable fall in availability of migrant labour post Brexit. So that's it's a good thing for graduates. It's going to help universities and HEIs attract more students to the UK with the the prospect of working for 2 years after graduation. So that's my lot really. I've been working on a laptop, so I haven't been able to look at anything else beyond my slides so far. So I'm just going to go onto the Teams just to check for questions. I should have mentioned really, I would have been happy to take questions, but I probably wouldn't have answered them during the presentation. My email's on the final slide, and absolutely happy to answer any particular questions people may have. But that's my lot, and thank you very much for listening.